Well, as you know, of course, today is Palm Sunday. And the title of my talk is, Who is Your Savior? 2,000 years ago, before Jesus, the Hebrew patriot Abraham received a message from an angel. He was told a Messiah would come and make a great nation out of his seed. Later, prophets predicted that he would be a king, a great king, who would come of the royal line of David and who would be the savior of the Hebrew people. Now, you have to remember that the Hebrew people, after a moment of a great monarchy under Solomon, ended up being conquered by nation after nation. And they were used to being enslaved by this time. So they really needed a savior. And they were looking forward to this savior for generations. Remember, all these kings that enslaved them were absolute monarchs who had power of life and death over them. And if they were lucky enough not to be slaves, then they were taxed heavily. So in centuries of being a conquered race, after this time, the Jews really longed for this Messiah, this Savior. Now, what kind of a Savior or king would you think they expected? Okay, imagine that you were one of the Jews waiting and hoping for this Messiah. How would you picture him? All right, think of him. I personally picture a tall, handsome, giant of a man, impressive, with jeweled armor, riding a huge stallion, preferably white, and carrying a mighty jeweled sword. Does that sound like the kind of a savior you'd be looking for? Oh, followed by a huge army. Now that's the savior the Jews were hoping for too. And wouldn't you expect trumpets to be roaring to announce his presence? Wouldn't you see people throwing flowers? You realize how expensive flowers are in a desert? Throwing flowers, welcoming him. Well, this is exactly what the materialistic Jews expected too. And Jesus knew this. He knew what they expected. But on that Palm Sunday, this day is named after, when the promised Messiah made his triumphant entry into the capital, he wasn't sitting on a magnificent horse, but and this is, I'm quoting the Bible, not using profanity. He was sitting on the unbroken foal of an ass. His saddle not only wasn't jeweled, he didn't have one. Instead, he sat on garments that the apostles had thrown over the back of the little donkey. He had no sword, no jewels, no armies, no trumpets. His feet hung almost to the ground on that little donkey, because he had no stirrups to support them, and the donkey was so small. Does this sound like this king we're expecting? And instead of trumpets and flowers to welcome him, people waved palms. Now, palms were cheap. You reached up and grabbed one. So Palm Sunday to us sounds fabulous, a palm, wonderful. But all they did was reach up from the trees and wave what was around. There was no evidence whatsoever of worldly power when this man rode in on an ass. Jesus made every event of his life into a dramatic picture book. He knew the children of Israel would someday grow up and realize that there was meaning to everything he said and did. For example, where was the great Messiah born? Well, not in a palace. Not even in a wealthy home where his mother was visiting when she had him. Not even in an inn because they couldn't afford an inn. But in a stable occupied by animals. His father wasn't a rich king, but a poor, uneducated carpenter. And both parents were members of the Jewish race and were basically enslaved. So you see, everything he's painting in these pictures is opposite to what one would expect. He had a reason for making his life pictures of vivid contrasts to worldly expectations, because he taught that things were the exact opposite of what they appear to be. He taught not just with words and miracles, but with every single act and circumstance of his life. He literally personified the way life really, really works. He knew that many centuries later, people like you and I would finally get it. So when Jesus entered Jerusalem, he proclaimed himself the Messiah, because otherwise it would have been doubtful just looking at him. He quoted the Old Testament, and he announced all this was done, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Tell you the daughter of Zion, I the King cometh unto thee, meek and sitting upon an ass, and a colt, the foal of an ass." Matthew 21:4-5. Later, this obscure prophecy showed that it had been fulfilled on that Palm Sunday, centuries and centuries ago. Now, if Jesus wanted to be accepted by the Jews as the Messiah, why did he choose to make this kind of a triumphal entry? Because someday he knew that the pictorial message would be understood. And he created a scene that was the exact opposite of what was expected by the Jews of this Savior King. He didn't ride a horse, even a horse, because horses symbolized war and power. Donkeys are domesticated, and they're descendants of untamed asses. They're slow, they're obedient, persistent, and sure-footed. Jesus made a brilliant point by the way he entered Jerusalem. The scene he painted taught that worldly power means nothing. The real power is exactly the opposite of what we think and expect. Jesus showed us that we must rise above, tame our animal nature, represented by that little donkey. And he carried no sword to show that only peace produces peace. Warlike weapons produce war. The very word Jerusalem means habitation of peace. When you realize this, you see that Jesus' entry into Jerusalem showed us how to enter into a state of peace by taming our lower animal nature and riding above it. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." This is the way to peace. Take charge, rule your emotions, represented by the word heart. Rise above fear and tame your animal nature, and you will experience peace, and you won't be afraid. Interestingly enough, Palm Sunday was the only time in the whole New Testament that Jesus ever used any form of transportation. Jesus means spiritual awareness. He showed us not only that we must take control of our younger, lower animal nature, but also our emotions. We must ride above our five senses, he agrees. The world of effects, and understand that the invisible world, the world we can't see, is the power that produces the material world, the world we see. When you know this, it's the way to peace. Our lower human nature, symbolized by the S, judges everything by its five senses. You know, I can't help but wonder, too, if Jesus didn't have a great sense of humor and implied that we were making asses of ourselves in our present state. We can see today that this lesson Jesus portrayed was really a dramatic one, saying, stop looking to the outside world to save you. It isn't the power that can do it. Today, a new king is crowned. Your own conscious awareness that you are spirit with the power of heaven, the power above matter, to control and rise over the outer world, which is really the world of effects, the effects that we make. In words that we hardly understand anymore, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within. Now remember, he was speaking to Hebrews who had 600 words in their language. He couldn't start explaining quantum physics to a bunch of fishermen and shepherds. So they couldn't understand the words today that we would understand. So he used the word heaven, meaning everybody knew the sky was above and was heaven. So he said, that's within. It's above the earth, which is down there. And there's always a king in the kingdom. So within the heaven, which is in us, is the king, which is in us. And then he said, be it done unto you according to your faith. Your beliefs are where? In your own mind. They're not in anybody. You can't tell me what I believe. You can try. But I'll be bored and won't listen, like most of us don't. I mean, when we argue with each other, try to convince somebody else of something they don't believe. So it's your belief. By thy words you shall be justified, he said. Now your words, where do they come from? Unless you're a ventriloquist, they come from your own mouth. Judge not by appearances, not with your eyes, but judge from within, your understanding that you are creating what you see out there. Realize the inner controls the outer. And he said, this is always amazing. He said, the works that I do, ye shall do, and even greater works shall ye do. In modern language, he said, look within yourself. There are infinite possibilities available to you. Look within. Choose what you want. Choose what you can believe. And you can create anything. You can do greater works than he did. Hard to believe, because we don't believe it. Now, 2,000 years have passed, and wars still rage on planet Earth because men have not understood Jesus' message. And they've never followed his example, although many of them say, I am a Christian. Sometimes you wonder what they think they mean. 5 people, 10, 50, 1,000 people can say, I am a Christian, but each one believes something different, even though they say, I am. War must stop always within each one of us before they can stop in the outer. You must see that the kingdom of heaven is here now because you make it come forth here and now from the invisible using your inner powers. When the angel said at Jesus' birth, peace on earth to men of good will, They meant that when men will good, there would be peace on earth. How do we escape or find this peace? How do we enter Jerusalem peace? Today, on this Palm Sunday, in 2016, at Unity of Carlsbad, know that the power to control your world is within you. And take control of your warring thoughts and feelings. Tame them by using your power. Use tapping. Meditate. Go within. I know it's hard. I find it hard. But go within. Take your attention from the outer and put it on the inner. And realize that Jesus used the word Father to mean cause or thought when he said the Father is within. And thought makes the Son, the outer world, in its exact image. Today we say thoughts are things. And things are always exactly like the thoughts that you have. So as long as the emotions of fear, anger, and hate dominate our feelings, we'll never find peace within or without. Because as you sow within, so you reap without. If you plant a rose, this was a very important thing that about, I don't know how many years ago, and I wouldn't admit it if I did. This particular thing got me. Think about this one. It's so simple, and I missed it. If you plant a rose of love, you can expect a rose of love to grow in your garden, not a cactus. When you plant a thorn symbolizing hate in your garden, you can expect a thorn of hate to grow in your garden, not a rose. Things grow in the image of the seed that you plant, and you have the power to choose the seed. Your thoughts and feelings grow from within your inner world, just like a seed. And they grow up and out, and people, literally sometimes people, your world. And notice, thorn didn't plant the thought planted the thorn. We have everything backwards. This is what Jesus showed us on Palm Sunday, when instead of coming like a conquering hero, he came like a guy sitting on an ass. I mean, really, what a contrast to what everything was expected. Right now, we're victims until we realize that we are the power, that we can choose what we want to grow in our world. Do you want heaven or hell? Because you create either one. And I've got to tell you, years ago I created a hell in my life that was so imaginative, so unbelievable that I look back and think, what a powerful creator. What a hell of a life I created. Ooh. But when you know this truth, you look at it and you think, well, I created it, but I don't want any more of that. And that's when you begin to create heaven. And by the way, use intention. When you get up in the morning, set an intention for the day. Like if you have to go to the DMV, take a driving test, decide that you don't want to take the test. You just want a 5-year license. Okay? It's something simple, material maybe. Maybe you want a new job. Well, intend to find it. Intend for it to find you. That's easier. How do you become aware of your inner powers? Listen to the words you speak and make sure they're good words. Examine your beliefs. Do you believe that God created man in his image? Well, images reflect exactly what's in front of the mirror. If a pig stands in front of a mirror, you don't see a duck. If a thought of poverty stands in front of a mirror, you don't see a pile of gold. So, don't put pig thoughts before the mirror of your world. Focus your powerful attention and intention on things you want. And remember, it's very important to feel like you already have it. Because remember, in the world above heaven, there's infinite potential, and it's always now. It just takes a little time for it to show up in our world. So remember to thank God that you have it now, because you already do up here. And it just takes a little time to show down there. Watch your imagination. The world I created, that bad one back when, man, I thought about it constantly, and I worried about it, and I imagined the worst things that could happen, and they did. Remember, if you focus on bad things, they'll keep coming into your life. So Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, 21 centuries ago, painted a vivid picture showing us how to reach what? The next step, next Sunday, resurrection, and then ascension. Easter symbolizes resurrection. It's spring, and it's not an accident. It's in the spring. That's when there's new growth. Stop expecting the outer world to have the power to save you. The outer world isn't the Messiah and never has been. Stop expecting him to come from out there riding that horse. Take control. Examine your thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, and focus on what you want. Then you can rise above the dead past, the world of matter that you created, to the life that you will create, or already is available, but you have to bring it down here. What Jesus said in code on Palm Sunday was, no outer king saves you. You are the king. I have showed you the way to save yourself. When you know this truth will set you free. Happy Palm Sunday, and create a new world.